Thanks everyone for joining. This is the third in our series of our Advise, Assist and Answer webinars that we've set on, designed to help rev up and drive your business forward in these challenging times that we're now in. The purpose of this webinar is to help you to grow your business using existing resources, maximizing your production capacity and profitability through lean principles. Lean principles is something we're very passionate about here at Coastal, and we've gone through the process ourselves with Lee and Lester and found it very beneficial and thought it would be beneficial for yourselves as well. So from those who don't know me, I'm Neil Jones, Marketing Manager at Coastal Group, and on with us today we've got Lester and Lee from TXM Lean Solutions, and also Lauren, CEO of Coastal Group, who's very passionate on lean principles. So brief run through on the agenda. What is lean and is my business ready for it? Typical processes and problems in workshops. Applying lean concepts to solve the problems. Some case study examples. Then we'll have the Q&A session, and then Lauren will just round up the session and over to you guys to implement, so to speak. So with that, I'll hand over to Lester. Over to you, Lester.
Thanks, Neil. Just take control of the screen. Just give it a couple of seconds. Okay, so I think I'm in control of the slides. So thank you, Lauren and Neil, for inviting us to speak. And hopefully you'll find this useful. No matter what industry you're in. So this is part of our Lean Insights program. And before we get onto the topic of Lean, I'd just like to give a brief introduction to TXM so you know who we are. We started in Melbourne, but we're a global organization. Our function really is to help business with their growth, overcome growth issues. So we are focused on a return on investment and solving growth problems with companies. They get to a certain size and then they find that things aren't as efficient or they've stopped growing. So that's really our business. So we're a lean consultancy, and our focus is on getting you to overcome those growth problems. Sorry, just having a problem with the slide. My background is in lean laboratory and in sales and marketing, but I've got a lot of experience in dealing with the kind of problems you've all experienced as owners and leaders within your company. Joining me today is lean consultant Lee Candy, who is based in Andover. He's very experienced in implementing lean, particularly his background's in aerospace and electronics industry. But he's an expert on lean manufacturing principles, problem solving and cultural change. And Lee's worked very successfully with many businesses in the UK, and particularly with Coastal Group. And in fact, this picture was taken at Coastal Group in one of the last sessions where Lee was actually helping. So, although the title of the webinar is Lean for Windows, for door and window manufacturers. Sorry, just having a problem with the slide. Okay. Your business may be slightly different, but actually the lean principles apply just as well. So it's aimed primarily at joinery and glazing, but the same problem-solving techniques will apply for you. So the question now is, what are our key topics and what's the aim of this? Well, really, the idea is really to tackle the concept of lean. What is my business ready for it? What are the typical problems that we find in fabrication and joinery workshops, and how do we apply the lean concepts to solve those problems? And Lee's going to take us through some case studies. At the end of the webinar, you're not going to be an expert, but at least it will have opened your eyes in how you can look at your business and begin to see where the problems are, and give you an idea of how you might tackle those things, even if you may not be able to tackle them yourselves. So often we have a question, is my business ready for lean? And really, the question here is, how do I know? I mean, maybe we're too small, or are we the right size? How will I know if I need to implement a lean transformation? So you'd probably expect me to say that there's always a good time, or maybe it's never a good time. We're always too busy. But the reality is, once you have more than about 6 people in your business, it's likely that the complexity will start to mask the hidden wastes in your business. So really, the obvious answer is if your business has stopped growing for any other reason than sales pipeline. So that's really the key, is your business still growing? And let's look at the reason why your business may stop growing. This is what should happen when your business grows. It's called the economies of scale. And your variable costs should grow in line with your sales. So things like labor, cost of goods, packaging, those are things which should increase as you sell more goods. You have fixed overheads, buildings, machinery, those things are irrespective of sales. So what you should find is that with the economy of scale, the cost per unit decreases. What often happens is, you find this scenario is that with the increased complexity and a lack of control, you'll find that your overheads increase faster than your sales, and your variable costs increase proportionately as well. So what's the reason for this? It's probably that you have inefficiency in your business, and the way that you're tackling it is to perhaps buy more machinery or employ more labor. So your profit shrinks and you stop growing. So even though you can say your business is successful, you may have these problems. So you're having more and more layers of people, more people that are harder to supervise, labor efficiency is falling, you have more and more defects in your product, problems aren't getting solved because there are too many problems, profit margins are decreasing, your lead times are getting longer, batch sizes are increasing, maybe you've got more inventory than you need, and you'll find that you start to run out of cash. So eventually you will stop growing, and this is where many businesses level out at a certain size and they don't grow any further. So what is your business missing? You can still have a successful business, but what is the trajectory that you're running in? Is it growing? Is it flatlining? Or is it tailing down? How can you change that trajectory? So if you think about the things in your business, do you have effective business processes? Are they streamlined? Are they low cost, trouble-free operations? And are the customers getting what they need on time, in full? Are you getting the best out of your people? And are your senior leaders engaged and driving growth in sales or profits further? So if you think about when the company was small, what we're really trying to do is to get back to that position where you maybe had 2 or 3 people and you knew exactly what was going on in your business. So the whole idea is to look at your business and think, how can we get back to that more that initial state where I was in control and I knew everything that was going on. So as I said before, it's probably around the point where you've got more than 6 to 7 people, you'll start to risk losing control. If you look at your processes, there's often what you think your process is. And if you analyze it, this is what the process actually is. So if you take the time to go down to the shop floor and work through not just the product flow, but actually the information flow, you can find that it's a lot more complex than you thought. And then this is really how it should be. Are all those extra additional steps necessary? So waste is often disguised as useful work. So everyone's busy doing something. But if you actually look at the processes, how close is it to the way that it should be? So what do we mean by lean? So lean can be defined as the elimination of waste from a process by separating value-added and non-value-added steps. So what is value? So value is all of those activities that a client is willing to pay for when they engage our services. This is things like the design of the product, its functionality, the quality. So what is waste? Waste is everything else. It's all of the non-value-added steps, everything that you shouldn't expect the customer to pay for. This is things like labor costs, delays in production, waiting for products to be checked, for example, over-checking, rework. All of these things are the costs you are carrying in your business, which you cannot reflect in the price of your product. Otherwise, you'll be uncompetitive. So let's look at the typical production steps in a joinery business. And as I mentioned earlier, this doesn't just apply to joinery. You can do this with any kind of business and look at the steps in production. So you'll probably find you have some kind of drawing, survey element, a technical detail. You're taking the quotation. So you'll go to site. You'll be given the specifications of the door sizes, the frames. You'll be speccing the building. That's then probably put into a CAD or an exploded view. From that, you produce the bill of materials. You then start production. So you have a cutting, drilling, milling machine. Then there will be a painting or a coating step, which moves through into assembly, fitting the hardware, finishing, so sanding, polishing, and packaging, and then delivery to the customer. So if we accept that these are our processes, let's look at the first typical problem. And that is, within this flow of work, we have different speed processes. So we're moving from slow drawing technical processes, and in the middle here we have a very fast production process. That's usually some kind of machinery or automated function that then has a high output, and then we move to the slower stages, which are perhaps the more skilled part, the assembly, the fitting, the finishing, and finally the packaging. So what problem does that cause? It creates uneven flow. So what we're doing is actually, because of the unevenness and the different speeds in production, we're encouraging batching and overproduction. So we're creating bottlenecks. We're actually taking up space because we are producing a lot of material very quickly. And we're producing what we call excessive work in progress. It's tying up inventory. It's tying up the cost of raw material, and it's taking up space. And it means that there is a time taken for that material to be processed. So we're encouraging waiting. So an example here, this is a CNC machine. It's actually a beam saw, which I'm sure is very familiar to you. And the CNC machine is great, but it has a very high output, and it means that you have a very fast step in your process. So what is the lean solution in coping with different speed processes? Well, we have a concept called takt time, which is the rate of demand, and we're looking to control the release of the work so that we don't get the problems that are listed above. And as part of that, we have a concept called load leveling, which is where we balance the workload and we make sure that the correct amount of resources are applied where needed. In other words, if we have a slow process that is taking a lot of time, we need to make sure that we have enough resources to keep that working at the takt time. We can also use visual management to control the work in progress. So let me just talk a bit about what we mean by takt time and load leveling. So remember, this is about how do we control the speed of production in our process and get everything even. So the first thing to do is to work out what rate you should be working at. The takt time is the customer demand. It's the product demand. So how many units do I need to produce per week? So we can make a calculation. It's the customer demand divided by the working time available. So for example, 25 units per week, we have 5 days. So that's 7 hours a day. So therefore, we know that our takt time, our production rate, should be 84 minutes per unit. So the first thing is, how does that 84 minutes relate to our lead time, for example, of a week? So if you're quoting a customer of a lead time of a week, just think about all of the extra non-value added steps that go into that week compared to the actual production time of 84 minutes. So that's the first question you can ask yourself is, what's that relationship? You can then start to tackle the problem by measuring each phase. So if we think back to the production steps, we have a measurement stage where we're measuring the pieces, we're taking the drawings, we're then moving it onto the cutting machine, on the CNC or any kind of automated process. We then have a powder coating or a painting process. And what we're doing here is we're comparing the time it takes at each step compared to our rate, our theoretical rate of 84 minutes. And you can see a lot of these processes may be taking less time than 84 minutes. But then suddenly we get to an assembly phase, which is taking a lot longer. So what's happening here is we're running very fast through some processes and then things are slowing down, which is encouraging a buildup of work in progress. So what do we do once we've made that analysis? We've seen that there's a mismatch between our takt time and our processes. So what we need to do is identify the steps, time each step, and aim to bring each step below or just on the takt time. And this is where we can level up. This is called load leveling, and we adjust resources to achieve the takt time. So what we can do here, how do we do that? Well, what we do is we combine functions. So what we'll do is we'll combine several processes into one location or maybe one operator and make sure that these two functions are done by the same person at the same time or the same group of people, the same team, but we combine them so that they are almost one function that matches the takt time. And you can see we have, and if we are in the assembly phase, it's taking too long, then we can bring more people in to make that quicker. You can even find that we have time, that's the yellow marking there, is we have extra time to improve the quality of the process. So that's load leveling. So Lee, do you want to take us through a typical case study for Salisbury Joinery?
Yeah, thanks, Lester. So Salisbury Joinery, they're about 40 years old, and they produce high-end wooden windows, doors and staircases. They had the same problem you just mentioned, Lester, and that was how do we increase productivity and do it in a way that we can get more units out but also maintain visibility of products in the business. So what you normally find is typically in a joinery or any volume business really is we may release some work to the production facility. And if we release another job and then another job, it's very hard to find out where in the process a particular piece of work is or where the job is. It's very hard to understand where we should be based on the customer expectation, delivery expectation. So when we're looking at lean and flow, we're looking primarily to link everything to that takt time. And that's exactly what we did with Salisbury Joinery. We looked at, okay, what did you produce last year? On average, one of their lines produced 3 units a day. And then we went through what's called a value stream mapping exercise to really understand the end-to-end processes. And they're the typical things that you mentioned, Lester. So how long does it take to CNC something? How long does it take to assemble something? What about the paint shop? What about the final assembly? How long do these activities take to make one unit? We don't want to look for batches. If you're making in batches now, that's fine. But we just want to know how long it takes to make one unit. We call that cycle time. And then we work backwards to say, well, how many should we produce? So for Salisbury Joinery, we were looking for 9 units a day. So from 3 last year to 9 units a day was a target. And if you could go to the next slide, that's good, thanks. So that's specifically the challenges were what we were mentioning. So lack of visibility, on time in full metric. We need to implement something that allows us to understand whether we're good, bad, or indifferent every day, or more importantly, from my lean perspective, where we should be able to understand within an hour, every hour, where we are to plan. So if you've got 10 different jobs, it doesn't matter, where are we to plan every hour? So that I call that hour by hour reporting. So using visual management to identify the pace of production against the plan, which is really important. And we wanted to implement a new lean culture. So when I'm not there, we still practice the same principles, the same lean philosophies, the same tact time, line balancing, level loading, those type of things, so the teams can carry on in the future. Thank you. So what we did is on the top right, that's called a value stream map. You will get to that shortly, but that's where the whole thing starts. We don't do any improvement until we map the value stream. So if you look at the steps on the bottom, more importantly, they're the production steps. The pink post-its in between the yellowy green post-its are the work in progress. And that's extremely important when we're mapping the value stream, because we need to see where the uncontrolled WIP is, the work in progress. From there, we create tacts. From there, we create level loads, cellular teams, and we reassign activities based on the tact time. So as Lester was saying, well, how long does it take to assemble something? How many people do we need to hit tact is the most important thing. The next important thing is reduce batch sizes. If you're making in tens, the smaller the batch size is the most important, because we increase flow. So for Salisbury Joinery, I think the typical batch size going through now is 3. I think it was, I may be wrong, but I think it was double that, 5 or 6 batches. We're looking to get close to one piece flow, which is the ultimate lean, but we're going to go from 6 to 3, which meant we could go from 3 units a day to 9 units a day using lean tools. The other photos here were visual management, giving you all the tools in the shadow board for the job, so we didn't have to search and find things. There's a tact board on the top. If you can see the shadow board, there's a small tact board which says how many units they have to make an hour, and that all the operator has to do is red, green. So if we walk the system, we should be able to see that within 30 seconds, whether we're to pace or not. And then you can see other footprinted areas. These are work in progress, so that's not finalized, but we're now starting to put pieces in the jigsaw, put work in progress, and it's standardized work in progress based on flow, so we don't have too much work in progress. And we have dedicated footprinted areas for that. And these are our first in, first out bays. So we release work in small increments of work, we flow to a tact, and we move work on to a pitch, which is a certain amount of time. Every certain amount of time, every interval, we'll move work along. So Salisbury Joinery are well on their lean journey now. They've leaned up their assembly line. They're working now on their paint shop and their final assembly. And their production manager said that the biggest change has been the fact that he doesn't have to get involved in the day-to-day running around and firefighting. For the first time, he can set the standard, set the scene, and then check the system's working every day. And that's pretty much what we're trying to do in lean.
Okay, great. Thanks, Lee. So that's reducing batch sizes. It actually increases output. And the aim is to achieve output to tact time. So this is problem number 2, probably the most common one, is mistakes not being picked up early enough. So again, we've got the same set of processes here, but you can see that we've got some complex processes at the beginning and less complex processes towards the end. So because we have complex processes at the beginning, the risk of high cost mistakes is created potentially at that point. And this is a nice slide we like to show, which explains how the impact of not picking up problems, how that can impact your business. So basically, abnormalities found and solved at the point at which they occur can hugely reduce the cost of rectifying those problems. So as production continues and the product with the defect moves closer to the customer, the cost and the impact are higher, and the ability to actually find the cause and eliminate it is reduced. So therefore, if you can hunt the cause down straight away and solve it at the point at which it's occurring, then you can, first of all, stop those problems happening again, but also it gets much lower cost for you in the business. And I'm sure, a typical example is when you get to site and you find that something, the measurements are slightly wrong, is a very extreme but common example. So what are the results of a mistake not being picked up early? It's very expensive to rectify. You've got wasted delivery and engineering costs. In construction, you're having to do rework. That means you're wasting your product. And it's also wasting time in production, tying up the machines because you have to rework on the machines. And it also leads to something called quality control, which you might think is maybe a good thing, but really quality control is something we seek to eliminate because it shouldn't, the need for quality control should be dealt with at source. A simple thing like a defect in the wrong place in the wood on a window frame, for example, means that you get to the end of production, the knot falls out, and you have to scrap the final product. So the lean solution here is to move quality to the source. In other words, pick the problem up early on in the process at operator level, and we can use a structured problem solving technique to do this, which I'll show you, and also standard work, which is really implementing a best practice of doing a particular function. So one of the ways in which we can pick up problems and solve them is using a concern strip. And this is a very simple magnetic strip which you can put in the workshop. And you can see it's packed with information. It's a very simple tool. But if you look at what's on here, it's everything that you need to solve a problem. The date at which the problem was picked up. Where are we in the workshop? What is the problem? So you clearly state the problem. What is the corrective action, the permanent corrective action to stop it happening again? But in the meantime, we need a short-term fix so we can continue with production. And then we need to control how we solve that problem. Who's responsible? When will it be reviewed? What does good look like? So what's the agreed good result, the agreed check? And how often are we checking that? Is it daily or weekly? And then we can have a scorecard to make sure that it's been checked. And this very simple tool is something you can implement yourselves to start tackling quality problems and get them picked up at source. So Lee, take us through SDS Protection.
Yeah, just go back to that last point in problem solving. This is one of the things that I see most of the time. Most companies don't get this right, and even the bigger companies that I work with and for have not got root cause problem solving right. What we tend to do is we have a problem, and then we have the interim fix. That's normally the workaround. The permanent corrective action never gets fixed because we're too busy, so the same problem comes back over and over again. So what I would suggest is if we start escalating problems in a standard way using something like this, a concern strip or an escalation strip, and we have a platform to review these every day, we keep them up on the board until they're fixed. So that means, we might have got a workaround, but have we resolved the problem? Will the problem come back? Probably. Well, keep it up there until we fix it. That forces us to resolve root causes. If we can do that, we can start to breathe a little, because we can get lost in so many problems every day that we just run around from one thing to the next and always firefight. So if we go back to the slide then, case study, SDS Protection in Guildford. They're a door manufacturer, internal door manufacturer, predominantly for construction and NHS. High quality doors. This was in 2018. So Darren, who at the time was production manager, he joined a workshop of ours a couple of years ago, and he was inspired, and he said, well, we've got 2 sites. Ideally, we want a double sales, and we want to ideally close everything down in one and do everything under one roof. He said, but I'm not sure we can do that. So we walked around and we saw that there's a lot of waste they were making in batches. There wasn't this concept of one-piece flow, which I mentioned earlier. And so we set about the task of doubling their sales on paper first, using value stream mapping, and bring it all under one roof with no additional headcount. So we didn't get rid of people. We just merged everyone under one site. So next slide, please. Thank you. And that's pretty much it. They were very conscious of increasing sales, and they were very conscious of improving safety in the factory as well. So the main crux of what we did was to go back to the basics. What's your demand look like this year? What does your demand look like in 2 or 3 years' time? Let's map it using a value stream map, and then start looking at how we can balance workload to suit tact. We can also, by reducing batches as well, because that's the most important thing you can do in your business, reduce batches, we can start seeing waste. We can start seeing the defects. Now, the problem that Lester was talking about earlier is the bigger your batch sizes, the greater chance of you not being able to see defects until it's too late. So I worked with a manufacturer years ago. They made keypads at the time, and they made 80,000 keypads a week. And the problem is their processes were so poor that they couldn't see the defects until the end of the line. That meant, in theory, 80,000 keypads could have a defect in them because the batches were so big. So by reducing batches and making close to one-piece flow, you can see defects fast. The lean element there is to stop, fix, and then carry on the line. So the transformation at SDS was literally to be able to do that. We merged everything to one site. We made in one-piece flow. We balanced operations to double the sales, and we could start seeing defects at source because we reduced batch sizes and worked to what's called standard work. Now, standard work is really important. Imagine an assembly line in automotive. Each station would have standard work to suit tact. So if the pace on a manufacturing line in automotive is 60 minutes, is about one every 60 minutes for Toyota, I think. Their tact would always be about 60 minutes. So there'll be work for each operator around 60 minutes. Standard work will be in front of them to say, this is exactly what you do. Once you finish that, you go to the top again and repeat on the next car. And that's what we want to try and do. And that's what we did in SDS is, this is a repeatable process. Let's just repeat it, standardize it, repeat it, and keep repeating the number of times a day. So in this instance, I think it was 40 doors a day, I think, maybe 40 doors and 30 odd frames a day, I think it was. And that's the level that we got to at SDS as well, using these principles.
Thanks, Lee. And our third problem, which Lee's hinted at there, is poor layout. So again, if you look at your processes, this graphic shows you the impact that a poor layout has on the flow rate, and you can see it has the greatest impact where you are, perhaps not surprisingly, where you've got the most machinery, the most people working. So the red area there is where a poor layout in your factory, in other words, where people are, where the machines are, how the processes are grouped together, will have the biggest impact on the production rate. So with a poor workflow, what you are doing is encouraging excess motion. That's people moving around. So if you have your machinery spread out, your cutting machines spread out more than unnecessary, you're encouraging people to work by just moving between. It may be collecting the next work in progress, or going to another part of the building, collect the next piece of work. Excess transport is moving the stock around, so handling and double handling the work in progress and the stock. And really, you're encouraging work to fill the day. In other words, people know what needs to be done by the end of the day, and they're not aware that a lot of what they're doing is not adding value, and they just accept the environment that they're working in. So they are used to walking greater distances to collect the next piece of work. So how do we control that, and what's the solution to a poor layout? And one of the main solutions is to create what we call a flow cell. So a flow cell is a grouping of processes within a small area to limit transport, motion, and build up of inventory. So, for example, rather than moving a whole batch of material from one process that then gets transported to the next process in the building, the idea is to have everything in the same area, create a cell, and that could be, for example, you combine your drilling, your routing, edge banding, and laminating, and that kind of process in one area, and the same operators work through that process before the product then gets moved on to the next main stage. So you're combining all these processes. I mean, a typical thing to think about is it's quite common for a product to be finished and placed on a pallet, which then needs to be moved and then taken somewhere else to be unpacked, to be repacked. So if you think about it, why could that product, as soon as it's finished that production process, why does it need to be put onto a pallet without being packed? You could get that part of the flow cell function could be to actually pack the product straight onto the pallet that can then be moved out to the courier. So these are the sorts of things that you start to think about. Have I got unnecessary steps in the process which I can combine? And the ways in which you can do this is by controlling the work in progress by visual management. So how do you control where things go and how much space it's taking up? Well, it's easy because you can just define dimensions to limit the build up from a CNC, for example. So to stop the CNC machine producing too much stock and filling too much space, you can simply create a visual guide to the maximum output. So this is an example on the left there. You can see we have a defined space with limited capacity. So the output from a certain machine can only would need to stop once that capacity has been filled. And this is how you can control the amount of work in progress. On the right-hand side, you can see that we've got replenishment tabs. This is what we call a Kanban system. So once you get to a certain point, you can then you then know that you need to replenish the stock. And this is a very useful. These are doors or panels. What it means is that you are controlling the amount that's taken from the main warehouse and put onto the shelves. You know when you need to replenish the stock, and this also works for your inventory control as well. When you get to the red tab, you know that it's time to replenish the stock. Rather than doing this on the spreadsheets, it's handled visually. How do we improve the way the workshop looks and the workshop area? If you're not familiar with the principles of 5S, this is a nice explanation. What we're doing really is improving the culture and ownership of people in their workspace, to take pride in their working area and to make sure that everyone has the right tools available at the right place at the right time. So the 5 steps are that you sort out what you need, get rid of what you don't need, you put everything in its own place, you make sure that you check and you keep it clean, keep it that way, and you then standardize the ways in which people work so everyone works in the same way. And then you set in place ways of identifying how you can improve and fine-tune this process. So what does 5S look like in practice? It's very simple. It looks tidy, it looks neat, and the tools are available. Everyone has their own set of tools, particularly these days. That's more important than ever. So it's really just, and you'll find that going through this process increases the ownership and improves the layout in the business as well. So Lee, take us through. Take us through an answer.
Right, supply advanced timbers. Timber systems there. I think Rory's on the line, so if he's there, he'll be very familiar with what I'm saying. Alistair and Rory, they identified the fact that the business can grow, and Ali was saying that he believes he could double his business with the same amount of people. He believes that they're not working in a standard way. He also believed that the layout wasn't conducive to flow as well. So the background is they produce high quality internal doors for health, education institutions, etc. And there was a great feeling that productivity, the way things Ali would do it as the leader of the business, probably hand on heart wasn't being done in reality. So we were asked to basically increase production, design a new layout to suit this new flow, and significantly improve the flow of work across the business effectively. So again, what am I going to say? We start with a value stream map because that's a classic lean tool. This is a process I go through all the time. And with Rory's help, we developed the concept of flow. So we started with pretty much from a standard. There was no workshop that the guys attended. I worked predominantly with Rory and the team leaders, with Ali support as well. And we went through the basics, the understanding of flow, how we had to flow the workplace. And if we didn't get the layout right, what you would do is you would have this dreaded work in progress in between areas. So as Lester was saying, the biggest thing you can do is have work in progress, because that just stops flow. So what we needed to do is take the work in progress away on paper and say, how can we flow it by moving things closer? So if there is a CNC machine, what's the pace of the CNC machine? Is there overcapacity? Do we have to run the CNC machine all day long? No, we don't. So how do we match it to suit the pace of production, which is that tack time? And what you'll normally find is, as Lester was saying, stop the machine. The machine is going so fast that it doesn't have to go too fast. You could stop the machine sometimes 2 or 3 hours in a day and still have enough work to produce the tack time to customer demand. So we looked at the machines, we looked at how we process from assembly through to all the way through to spray and out the door. And then when we looked at the layouts, we defined our value stream map as well. We reckon we could flow it like this, and this becomes our plan. We then went to the layouts, and we said, based on our value stream map and our flow, how could we flow it? So it's hard to see here, but we looked at moving machines closer than they were currently in place as well. So this is a new layout. So the business is building new barns, building new units as well. So they're going to start from scratch. So we had a great opportunity to say, how should it look? If we were to make one piece flow through the business, how can we lay out the area based on perfect lean? So we moved machines, we challenged current thinking, we looked at how we could flow from one step to the next, and we basically didn't need lots of space. We didn't need lots of floor space. And we found that we could create this concept of cells where it would go into the pre-production cell, and that would be running for only 2 hours a day. So it doesn't need to run all day long. We only need to run the cell for 2 hours a day to get enough work in the value stream to be able to deliver the customer demand. Then we had a working cell here, which was literally making joinery, CNC routing, that type of thing. Then it went into some other secondary operation, and then into spray and then out the door. So we mapped the whole layout based on one piece flow, even to the point of having staging lanes for the work to go into, the finished work to go into. So when the when the delivery driver backed up, they would go straight to their staging line and put onto the back of a lorry. So the thing really here is we're breaking down on what you probably look at as a work-based, work-to-order, custom manufacturing process where everything has to be made to order, to, well, we make doors. We do make doors. The thickness might change, the size of the door might change, but the process is a door. So if we can think about units per day, how many times does our process have to turn each day to make those units, then we can start thinking about how we flow across the business. So from my perspective, I don't ever really think about which customer order comes through. The operator doesn't need to know. They just need to know, what's my next door? Is it a blue door? What thickness is it? And then standard work to flow through the factory. Now, there will be some changes, but effectively most of the work will be repeatable. So we're looking at processes to repeat the number of days, the number of times you need them to repeat to each day to hit customer demand. And we create that system from end to end to be able to do that. A part of that will be layout as well as level load, as well as starting with a value stream map. So Advanced Timber, in this instance, they've got everything they need to go and implement what they need to do based on the value stream mapping and that layout exercise we did.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Lee. Sorry to push it on to the next slide because I'm conscious of the time. Let's just see if I have no open questions, but hopefully you'll find that that's covered probably most of the things that we asked your opinion on, what your pain points were before the seminar, and I went through those, and we've tried to put the presentation together based on those. So hopefully that's given everyone something, and hope you found that useful. So thanks very much to Lee. The idea is not to make you a lean expert, but to make you realize where can you be looking for these hidden wastes in your business, and how can you separate value-added steps from non-value-added steps. So that's really the aim of this webinar, and hopefully we'll achieve that. So I'd like to hand back to Lauren, who's going to from Coastal Group. So and he's very much a proponent of lean concepts, and he's embraced the lean philosophy. So Lauren, I'll hand over to you.
Sorry for the delay. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, Coastal have been kind of enthusiastic about the lean subject since 2017. Again, like Lee mentioned, we were inspired to start the journey. We're far from perfect and got a fair bit more to implement, but love that quote that continuous improvement is better than delayed perfection. And the other quote I always like is, if you don't feel you have any problems in your business, that is the very problem. So we just got 3 really quick examples. I mean, since we've been inspired by lean, we've introduced our focus is very much on helping the customer become leaner. One bit of feedback we were getting a lot was the state of malleable iron antique hardware. So we set out on a journey to create antique hardware that was made from stainless steel and therefore doesn't rust. So in theory, we're reducing back to site costs, which are a lot more expensive than many customers realise. Also, the Tritus window system is a flush casement timber window system. A great way to speed up production by simplifying the process. And lastly, another example, we had our last webinar was on this subject, but Duradine. It's a pre-machined profile that doesn't rot, allows you to have it on the shelf ready to go to get ahead of yourself. Just a update. So on the 5th of August, we have a research and development webinar. I recommend joining that one. There's many customers that do not take advantage of tax credits. At Coastal, we save a lot of money by doing this properly. We also, on the 4th of September, have a business performance session. Again, an unmissable event. Lee, there's a couple of questions that have come in.
Yeah.
Would you mind finishing us off with those, please?
Yeah. I'm just opening it up now. I can't see any questions in particularly though. Have I missed? Thanks Lester and Lee, Coastal, well said, very interesting. And more congratulations. So have I missed anything, or am I right in saying that? There's 4 questions open.
Sure, no, I think I didn't realise they were congratulations, which that's good news.
That's fine. We'll take that anytime over questions.
I would say though, because there's no questions, I would say that the crux from my perspective would be, look at your business and look at how you can flow by reducing batch sizes. That's the biggest one you can do. And if you focus on that, you can improve agility and speed in your business. So that would be my homework for everyone listening. Just focus on reducing your batch size released into the business.
And Lauren, could you just scroll back up to the TXM contact page? So if people want to know more from TXM, I think I skipped over that one. It's just up a couple of slides. So if people want to know more about how they can tackle their growth problems, go to the website, TXM, look at the case studies. And if you've got any questions, you can just email me.
I would also like to add as well that in all the years we've been trading, which is roughly 16 years now, I would say the money we spent on lean consultancy is the best money we've ever spent. I'm not trying to big TXM up, but it's a true fact that I can confirm with genuineness that investing in lean coaching is the best money we've ever spent.
Fantastic. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the return on investment just keeps going. that's the thing. Well outside the period of the project, that's a sustainable lean transformation. That's the benefit. So it's great to hear.
Thanks, everyone. I think that comes to the end of our webinar. Really appreciate you all joining. The webinar will be hosted on YouTube, and Neil will be sending rounds the resource pack later on today. So if you want to rewatch or share with someone else, please go ahead. Massive thanks to Lee and Lester and Neil for organising this. Trust you have a good day, and look forward to seeing you all sometime.